Hey everyone, it's the Comic Book Countdown with Sleepy Reader, aka Damien. I got 10 books this past Wednesday, February 24th, and I rank them from 10 down to 1 based on my own pleasure reading them. So that's that. It was a good week for reading comics overall for me. And I read quite a few other things other than this pile, but I wished I had even more time just to kick back and read. But in at number 10 for me is Edgar Allan Poe's Snifter of Blood. And neither story, this is an anthology that usually has 2 stories per issue, and neither story seemed to really go anywhere for me. They had bits of humor and oddness. It's kind of like this comic specializes in oddness and odd quirkiness, but neither story seemed to go really anywhere much. I think I slightly preferred the story about the message found in a bottle, which is based on, it was totally different than the Edgar Allan Poe story that it's based on, but with references to a lot of Edgar Allan Poe things. But it still didn't add up to much or make a lot of sense. I think I'm pretty much done with this series. This is the third volume, and it was a lot of fun at first, and it's just become a bit of almost a chore to read. So that's why it's in at number 10. Do I get the last issue of this volume or just drop it right now? I definitely, if they do more volumes, I don't think I'll be there with them anymore, unless I hear great things. In at number 9 was Superman and Imperious Lex, which technically is a future state book, but for all intents and purposes, it's really just Mark Russell take on economics and Lex Luthor and other kinds of commentary on dictators and lying politicians and things like that. It's kind of a wild ride, but it kind of, I liked the first issue better, and there's going to be one more issue, so it might elevate the entire story. And often for me, Mark Russell really pulls things out at the end for me. But overall, I just felt like it was kind of just a bunch of Mark Russell-like things happening between Lois Lane and Lex Luthor and Superman. So not bad, but didn't spark a whole lot of interest in me. Kind of similarly, Crossover is not a bad comic. I put it in at number 8 by the ever-popular Donny Cates and one of his better collaborators, Jeff Shaw. There's just not a lot in here that sticks to my ribs, I guess. It's fine, but it doesn't add up to a lot to me. I think my favorite bit was the appearance of the sword from Donny Cates's comic God Country, which is a kind of a favorite of mine. And so it's Valifax is the name of the sword. And then there was kind of a few pages that were basically like outtakes from God Country. And that was really cool. Jeff Shaw was the artist on God Country too. And then an ad for God Country right there. So it's a pleasant, fun read, but doesn't have a lot of staying power with me. I think I'll try one more issue. I like the whole package. They really are not skimping out on their customers. Then in at number 7 is the House of L, which is a future state one, and I think it's just a one shot. It was a one shot, and it was overpriced. And what was I going to say? And so it's a future where all kinds of descendants of Superman, thus the House of L, are kind of like their own legion of superheroes, and they're fighting a big bad named the Red King, who has conquered nearly everything, and only Earth is left to be protected by them. And it was a fun, pulpy read. But really by the end, I guess maybe I'll spoil the end a little bit, so if you want to skip ahead, you can. By the end, you really felt like you were coming in at the end of a story that you should have been reading many issues before so that you would understand the emotional impact of things. This Red King turns out to be one of the House of L. Turns out to be a direct descendant of Superman with superpowers. And how he became evil and why he's more powerful than everyone else and has an army of doomsdays and all that kind of stuff, we'll never know. And then the story, he's defeated and the story is resolved when old Superman shows up. So he's still alive? Where's he been? What's been going on? And apparently there's some whole backstory that we'll never know about his relationship with this one son and how he come. And so the story ends with him coming and forgiving the son and them flying off together. And that's our happy ending, I guess, without any context at all. So this kind of sums up Future State for me. It's like lots of glimpses of stories that might have been good or might not, but you can't really even tell because you don't have the whole story. And there's very little attempt to fill you in at all or tell you. There's a vague sense that these are happening in different universes, perhaps, different futures. But I don't know, because it's also called Future State, and it's an event, so should it all link together? But anyway, the end result is I feel perfectly fine cutting off all DC from my pull list and probably not picking up any off the shelves unless I hear something special. I'm a little bit tempted by this Philip Kennedy Johnson. Seems good at doing kind of a rousing, pulpy adventure kind of thing. It seems too bad to me that they put him on, that he's going to be on both Action and Superman. Be nice to have two different authors taking a crack at Superman, especially because unlike Brian Michael Bendis coming in as God's gift to comics when he came to DC, Philip Kennedy Johnson is a relatively unknown writer. Why hand him both the Superman comics for starters? I would have loved to see like a Tom Taylor Superman and then a Superman by someone less tried like this Philip Kennedy Johnson. So if I hear great things, maybe I'll jump back on Superman at some point. And I'm slightly tempted by the upcoming Swamp Thing, but even that's kind of got a bad taste in my mouth, so I'll just wait and see if I hear anything good about it. But meanwhile, there won't be any. I already made the big draw the line in the sand and said I'm not getting any Batman for a long time. I'm just taking a long, long break from Batman. So not that recent Batman like Bytinian and stuff was bad at all. It just felt all too familiar to me. I just felt like I'd gone through all these stories already. Okay, number 6, Scumbag. This is my favorite issue of Scumbag so far, but I'm also going to drop Scumbag from my pull list. What it made me realize, it's all the artist. It's Wes Craig. A comic book story reads better with a higher quality sequential artist, someone who really gets how a comic book works. And Wes Craig is brilliant. I would say if you're at all a fan of Wes Craig, just buy this issue. Don't worry about reading all of Scumbag. But at the end of the day, even with this much more exciting, vibrant storytelling, it's still just a Scumbag story, and it's still kind of the same as it was in the first issue. I feel like I've got Scumbag. I've got the Scumbag I need. So I'll just keep an eye on it. If there's an issue that looks like it has particularly great art, I'll pick it up. But otherwise, it's coming off my pull list. It's too bad. I was hoping it would be more creative in its scumminess. And I don't want redemption for the character or anything. That would just be totally predictable. But yeah, this was great art. This was maybe there was some other great art this week. This was one of the best of this week. So if I just rank things by art, there would be a top 3 or 4, and this one would definitely be in it. Very good art in my number 5 book, Oblivion Song, issue 30. You can kind of get the sense I might be cleaning house a bit. I've decided to move Oblivion Song onto my wait for trade comics. This is issue 30. Like I said, I followed it all the way through. I've enjoyed it thoroughly, but I guess story has reached a point where I just don't feel the need to get it every week, and I'll be happy to read it in trades and just see where it's gone. There was a sense the aliens from another dimension are invading Earth, and our hero is having a sword duel with their leader based on their code of honor, and that's kind of a cheesy old sci-fi thing from a million books I read as a kid. And so that might have influenced my sense of I can just wait for this on trades. Huge kudos to the artists on here. 30 issues of this incredibly great. By artists, I mean the line artist and the colorist. 30 issues of this incredible stuff, and it's still incredible to look at. They're doing the heavy lifting. Robert Kirkman's been doing a good job, but the artists have really made this comic a special one. So it's hard sort of to switch. You get like, oh, I want to have them all in one format, but it just makes sense to me as a reader to switch to trade for that. At number 4 is Ice Cream Man. And this was an interesting issue of Ice Cream Man. It was not like most Ice Cream Men that, have been my number one comic of 2019 and 2020, Ice Cream Man. Now it's making me worried. Has Ice Cream Man played itself out? This is the need to have a different gimmick every issue, starting to overwhelm the value or the quality of the stories. This wasn't a bad story at all. So as you can see, there was a picture on one page, text on the other, picture on one page, text on the other. And what I did is I just read all the pictures. It was like reading maybe a 2 or 3 page comic book story, and it was okay. It was creepy. It wasn't really a story. It was just a little vignette. And then I went back and I read all the text, and that turned out to be the right way to do it, in my opinion. I don't know what it would be like for someone who read everything totally in order as printed, but for me it worked very well because all the text was what characters were doing and thinking 4 and 5 hours after the events in the pictures. And it took me a while to get back to this book because I'm not excited to read something that isn't really a comic when I'm expecting a comic. And I can't say that as a prose writer, Maxwell Prince blew me away. It was interesting, is all I can say, really. And it kind of ended on a note of, well, we just don't know what's going to happen and what all these things really mean, and that's life. And I don't really know whether Ice Cream Man is on the downhill slope or not, and that's just life. At some point, I'll just have to make a decision whether I want to keep getting it. I mean, I'm still planning to keep getting it for now. It's delightful to see what they do each time. It does seem like earlier in the run, they didn't feel like every issue had to be something completely different. A number of them were just yet another surreal, disturbing mix of real life and horror fantasy. But it does seem like recently maybe there's too much pressure on the writer to make a gimmick each issue, like a more obvious gimmick each issue. I don't know. In at number 3 was Crimson Flower. Remains, just like with the first issue, a very unique book, and the voice of the artist, if you will, is so strong. And there's some just panels I really loved, and the colorist Bill Crabtree. I'm talking about the artist Matt Lazinski, and the colorist Bill Crabtree always works well with the art. He's never working against the art, that's for sure. So it has a very distinctive look and a very, I don't know. It's kind of a you'd love it or you'd hate it kind of visual style, I guess. But the The only slight downside is the whole issue was kind of a fight scene. It was really well done and fun to read, but afterwards I was like, well, this is kind of, I assume, like most Dark Horse series, it's only gonna be 4 issues, and the second issue is a fight scene. So we haven't delved further deeper into the story. And we get a few details in that fight scene. Oh man, look at the preview of the next cover. That is crazy. Yeah, so if you're a fan of this kind of, I don't know what to call it, but fans of Basil Wolverton or people like that who like just really weird, kooky artists with their own very personal vision, might just want to pick up Crimson Flower just for that reason. Okay, and then my number 1 and number 2 were really hard for me because I couldn't decide which is number 1, which is number 2. Two, in my mind, really brilliant comics. It was a thrill to read both of them. But in the end, I have to decide because I've created this format and forced myself into it. So I'm putting Rain Like Hammers by Brendan Graham, issue number 2, in my number 2 spot. It could have easily been a number 1, and it could easily be number 1 of the month. No problem. So, but sort of like Matt Lozinski, this is for people who are okay with this particular style, this particular very individualistic vision, and the story is very individualistic. If you like Mobius, you're quite likely to like this. There's lots of other influences in it, but that's the easiest takeaway. And if you like stories that aren't terribly straightforward, and I'm often like a big proponent of very straightforward storytelling, but I feel like Brandon Graham pulls off a more elusive storytelling in a way that very few other people can do. And at the same time, inside his elusiveness it's chock full of fantastic imaginative world building, idea building details. He's kind of, I don't know, in a weird way, he seems to me on a par with Jack Kirby in terms of exploding with creativity. But instead of it being this in-your-face, pow, wow, Jack Kirby kind of stuff, it's more sort of your mellow, I'm trying to find, I love these cities that he's creating. More mellow, laid back. The creativity is not in your face, but it's all there. And it all kind of makes sense if you get on the wavelength that the writer's on and look at all the details he's putting in. In fact, there's a really important detail on the cover that is a key to understanding a lot of what goes on in the comic. And luckily, when I picked it up, I noticed it there and I read it, and it said, a super criminal's mind is transferred into a genetically engineered butler. So when that transferal happened, I realized, oh, this must be the moment mentioned on the cover. If I hadn't read the cover, I might have been puzzled for a while and had to go back. So Brandon Graham's mind works in subtle ways, but it doesn't cheat. It's all there. And but the way he does cheat, I guess, is the last issue was this is a different story than last issue. Felt like last issue was to be continued. Feels like this issue is to be continued. So the one question in my mind is, will he continue this story, or will he come back to all the stories he's telling, or is this series, which I think is 6 issues, going to be 6 separate portions of stories, which I wouldn't put past him doing. On the surface, this is about a guy who I guess is some kind of criminal who's coming to search for his daughter in a giant floating world city that is made up of concentric layers. And the elites live near the middle, and he's had to take over the body of the butler, and now he's trying to find ways to get down into the more central layers to search out his daughter, named Elle, I believe, E-L. So yeah, I'm really excited by Brandon Graham right now, and I'm really excited to just see what he's doing with this comic. If the rest of it, like I liked the first issue, I like this issue even more. If the rest of it just keeps building that way, this will be a masterpiece for some of us, but not all of us. It's definitely one of those comics that's just for those who are on the wavelength that match with that. I think more accessible to everybody would be Usagi Yojimbo. This is one of the colorized reprints on the Wanderer's Road series. What was the name of this story? Did it have a title? I don't see a title. Anyway, it's a one-shot story, and it's so simple. There's just this insane guy who thinks the gods have told him to kill evil people, and he meets up with Usagi and they have a fight. But within that, it's just so well done, and it feels way more resonant than it should have been, and I enjoyed the heck out of it. It was weird choosing this as number one over the Rain Like Hammers, just because Rain Like Hammers had so many layers and depth, and this has depth through simplicity. But that's also incredible art, and incredible art to do, and very rarely do you find it being pulled off this way. Now, it might be that I've been reading Usagi for over a year and loving all of it, so I'm kind of on Stan Sakai's side now. With each issue I read, I am ready, I am primed to love his storytelling. But I still found this one particularly just satisfying, very satisfying. I don't know what else to say. So let me quickly show you some other things. Someone I follow on Twitter, a comic book person who just sort of seemed to, I don't know originally how I ended up following him, or he ended up following me. But there's a bunch of comic book people, comic book fans mostly, I follow on Twitter, and Russ is one of them. And I didn't realize till quite recently that he is also doing his own comics. This is a little kind of mini comic which I ordered from him. He must have mentioned it somewhere on Twitter, and I finally realized he'd done it. And it's cleverly about a goblin working in a corporate office with meetings and working in your cubicle and all of that. But the main theme of the story is just realizing you need to get to the meeting on time, or the boss is going to turn you into a stone gargoyle for the rest of your life. And so it just kind of encapsulates the anxiety and dread of the workplace in a really fun way. And you can see I think he colored it in with colored pencils, and I don't know if this is, I think it's a Xerox rather than a printout. But I'll leave Chris Russ's Twitter handle down below in case anyone wants to follow him. It kind of reminds you that anyone can do comics. You just have to get out there and do it. And my hat's off to Chris. He made a fun little comic. I really hope there'll be more issues. And then I had a really great time reading Radioactive Man number 88, which is really number 2. It's just a 6-issue miniseries back in the 90s where each issue was a takeoff on a different era of comics. So this is a takeoff on comics from 1962. A little bit of Clark Kent and Lois Lane, but mostly Marvel superheroes. We get a Spider-Man, Peter Parker takeoff. We get the Avengers. We get the whole, what do you call it? The appearance of the kind of the monsters from the deeps. How their giant monsters were always appearing in Marvel comics back in the day. So we've got this lava man from deep within the earth, and it's just really fun. The people doing this comic really knew their comics history and really had just fun making fun of it in a really loving way. So there's just lots of great Easter eggs for the experienced comic book reader in this. So I have ordered online the next few issues. The next one is going to make fun of the Denny O'Neil era Green Lantern, Green Arrow, where you find out your sidekick's a drug addict. In this one, he finds out his sidekick is a hippie. So I recommend those if you ever see those in the cheap bins, the Radioactive Man series from the 90s. So, fun times.